Welcome to the Executive Coach Podcast. Today I am sharing my 2025 review, and what I hope is that this will inspire your own 2025 reviews. I love listening to people that I follow and I'm hearing their end of year reviews or their goal setting processes. It always sparks some new ideas for me then to be able to put into my own life that I hadn't really considered before. So that's the spirit in which I'm sharing this. And the other thing that I want to share with you is the method, because I found this year's method really exciting. A lovely use of some documenting by me and some real data and then a bit of technology there as well. And in the end, what it's come up with is something that's surprised me as I've done my review and given me a much more accurate review of my year than I would have done by myself. So let's dive into that. The review is based on my to-do list method. Now, this is something that regular listeners will know about. At the end of every month, I take 5-10 minutes when I'm doing my planning to look back at the calendar over that last month and capture some of the lovely stuff that's happened. Now, that could be, for example, I've got it here actually. It's in my Apple Notes. So you've got January 2025 to-do lists, and I've got things like did a DEXA scan, got into the guest lecture affiliate faculty pool at London Business School, booked a girls trip, made various sales of my program. And I include lots of kid things in there as well. It's a really nice way while the month is still vaguely fresh. Sometimes when I sit down at the end of the month, the start of the month actually seems quite long ago, and I have to remind myself, which is why even then I use the calendar. But if you think about that versus just doing it just at the end of the year, it's going to be so much more beneficial to do that as you go along. So that's one thing I've managed to do consistently this year. And what's helped me is using my Apple Notes, because then I can also do it on the laptop. And whilst I do love my journal and putting pen to paper, what I found is trying to then condense and summarize that at the end of the year was a little bit more difficult. So I've made the decision this year to do that digitally and use AI to help me. And I use ChatGPT Pro. I have settings on there that protect my privacy. I also try and use it really mindfully and prompt it thoughtfully so that I am not overusing it just from a kind of energy perspective. But this was the perfect way to use ChatGPT, because I was able to submit my long list of the whole year and say to it, can you put this into some categories? I gave it some initial categories like work, family, home. One of the parts of the process was then to refine those categories once I saw how that looked. And I added a couple of categories because, for example, in my coaching work, although that sits within the overall work bucket, I wanted a separate category that marked out all the meaningful coaching experiences that I've had this year, because I noticed that those were coming up frequently and I wanted a way to just look at those. So once I had done that with ChatGPT, I was able to create or prompt a little narrative at the top, and I just said, please don't give me a word salad, use real examples from the list to give me a narrative arc for that category, which was nice because it was somebody other than me creating that summary. When we do these things just from our own perspective, it can be really easy to get limited and locked in by our own way of thinking. And by doing this, number one, I was doing something that felt more data driven, because it was taking all of the information that I had been inputting over the course of the year and used that to create those narratives and summaries, rather than me sitting down at the end of the year with the recency bias of what's been happening in the last couple of months in particular. It's so easy to forget things that happened early on. For example, I had in there, met a friend who was pregnant and we went to an exhibition, and that was in January. By the middle of the year, we were sorting out her baby shower. And recently I was going to visit her at home with her baby. And to me, I can't quite believe that when I met her at the start of the year, as one of my closest friends, she was actually pregnant and she didn't have a baby. And now her whole life is so different. So really being able to see things as they progressed over the course of the year. Similarly with the trademark for my new brand name, documenting when the idea came about and how that evolved, and then the whole trademark process, which was very extensive, and just seeing how that has worked its way through the year. So I think it gives so much more data around the journey, and then it's nice to then ask somebody else, in this case AI, to condense and summarize that for you. So even if you haven't been doing monthly to-do lists, you might be able to sit down and do some quarterly summaries of what you achieved in each quarter. And then whether you choose to use AI to do this or not, you can then structure that. And If you are somebody that has a little bit of and I think a lot of us can have this, recency bias, we can also underestimate what we've done this year rather than overestimate it. We're probably going to be more modest in our celebration of that success, then this is a really good way to see it all in one place. Soon I'm going to be meeting my fellow coaches for a mastermind, and as part of that we're going to be reflecting on our year and then looking forward, and rather than sitting there going with brain fog going yeah, this sort of happened and that was kind of good, I've got something much more solid. I actually went and got my document because I thought it'd be nice to show it to you so you can see it says 25 to-do list master document, and then it's got the categories, and then you can see that there's like a little narrative about work, talks about some of the things that have happened this year, and then it also has the list which just summarizes everything. You've got home and garden, social, family and kids, health, fitness and nutrition, and then general happiness was like a little bit miscellaneous but positive things that I had been capturing all year. And then we actually have at the back a little theme section which just are a few themes that I found to be meaningful for me this year. So that is a whole summary. That is the first part of the process. Now let's talk about what I discovered as part of this review. I had a lot of surprises in seeing it done in this way. The first one was on the social front. I hadn't quite realized what a big year this had been socially. On any given week, it doesn't feel like it's jam-packed, and it feels, because I don't like to feel super busy, I like to feel like things are more of a relaxed pace. But it's only when you see it all together. I've managed to see a lot of exhibition with friends. I've managed to see a lot of friends for walks. I have a lovely walking loop nearby, and I couldn't believe how many of my different friends I've taken on that loop. Also trips, random trip to India, girls trip to Montenegro, having a friend over to stay, loads of dance events, and just seeing it all together made me realize how full that was, and I appreciated seeing that. Another one that was completely unexpected was the garden. So I did not this year set up that gardening was like a key goal of mine or something that I wanted to focus on. In fact, this year I had gone for more of that surrender, goal-free type year, but so much has come together this year with the garden and doing it with my son. And then we do have somebody that comes and does the maintenance work in the garden, so that doesn't become overwhelming. And then what that allows me to do is work with him to keep evolving the garden. So I come with a lot of the ideas, he helps make that happen. And then we've also got my son who is hugely involved and does request the odd tool every now and then, like a special rake, and that really keeps him engaged in the garden. So this year we've built 3 compost heaps, and composting has been a huge part of that journey, but then also learning to split plants and move plants, and I've managed to propagate some from my mum's garden, discovering some hidden plants in the garden. So it's been a good year, but I think the thing I'm really excited about is actually next year, because a lot of it was laying foundations for next year. Then work, again, I hadn't set out to make this a huge year. The real priority for me, as my daughter's now entered secondary school, is just not wanting this time to go by in a blur and really savoring every day with my not so young kids. So that was a big focus for me this year. And then to be able to look at the work, and there's been a mixture of things. So there's been more fundamental shifts, such as getting a couple of trademarks for the business name Refreshing Leadership, and then also trademarking my main program Vision Code. But then the speaking events, new coaching opportunities, and just getting to work in lots of cool different places, but continuing also to evolve like what we're doing in the digital offerings and having our own custom GPT. So it turns out when you look at it all together that a lot has happened, even though in any given day it might not feel like it. Likewise, the podcast then got its own section as well. This is something that I have done consistently, and typically when I go out and about, people do mention the podcast proactively to me, and I'm always surprised to hear who's listening to it. So for example, I coach a group at London Business School. I went back to work with them last week, and they talked about how they'd been sharing some of the episodes and summarizing them and discussing it amongst themselves. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised because it is a top 2% podcast globally, and it does do well in the Apple career charts, but it's one of those things that on a daily basis, I think there are times when I've asked myself, oh, should it be bigger by now? Or just questioning it now that I don't work directly with the producer. Some of his support has been replaced by all the really lovely messages, people actually taking time to like write emails about episodes that have impacted them. And that then motivates me to want to keep going. So one of the things I discussed with my coach this year was that the podcast is the sort of unpredictable part of my business. It adds this creativity and almost serendipity to the business, which makes it wonderful. But it also means that one month it might bring me a blue chip client, another month it might bring me an amazing guest, and some months it's about the feedback and being able to have the conversations that I think are important to be having on here, and to really start seeing this now as a platform where people want to come and have leadership and planning conversations. We also, of course, have expanded to YouTube. We started sharing weekly episodes on there in September. Some of you might be watching this right now on YouTube. There are times when it's useful to have the visual aspect when I'm showing you bits of today's process, for example. So if you are audio only to date, please do consider giving that a subscribe and going over there and having a look, especially if you're a fan of the podcast. It will really help us. It costs nothing to press subscribe, and it just helps us. We reached that first early milestone of our first 100 subscribers, and I will put both of the links in the show notes, one that just takes you straight to the channel so you can check that out, and one that takes you straight to the subscribe button. The other things that I wanted to just touch on when it came to review were fitness, nutrition, and health. I had done a DEXA scan early on in the year that gives you your body composition. And so that felt like some real hard data to work with. And I'll probably do another one of those at the start of next year and see what progress I've made. I have changed my habits in that I now do, when possible, 3 strength sessions a week. And I used to just do PT sessions, but now I actually go and train by myself. So I've definitely up-leveled in the gym, but I'm not somebody who's blessed on this front. And so I've had to have some physio and continue to be determined to really build my strength up. And it's nice to see that I have progressed on my pull-up journey. I'm still not doing my pull-up yet. Apparently only 4% of women can do a pull-up, but I've definitely getting closer to that goal, and I'm not in any real hurry. It's just something fun and to be able to work towards. So I think that also makes it in line with that whole goal-free approach, which is enjoying it for the sake of it and having fun goals to motivate you. So I've touched on a few of the categories now, and there were others. So for example, on the finance front, it hasn't been reflected fully in that list. But I did work quite a lot on systems and getting good processes in place for investing and things like that. So that there are some quiet categories that have benefited as well, including also the house. There are a few things that I managed to get done on the house front that have been very visually rewarding ever since. I guess the main thing is that if I had sat down and written out those categories and tried to brainstorm a review of the year, I would have massively underestimated how many amazing things happened. And why is that important? Other than just for my own feel good, my own dopamine, it also matters when we're then goal setting. If we appreciate how much is possible in a year, then we can be excited and ambitious about the future years and optimistic. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet for my goal setting next year. And I may well do an episode on what I decide to do for that next week. For now, if you are somebody who's into goal setting, if you're somebody that's put a lot of work into your goals this year, this is one of the reasons we do it. So we can then look back and feel proud of ourselves and take that time to appreciate what's worked, what hasn't, things that have been underestimated. Another example is for my kids. I could not believe how many activities my kids have been participating in on a sports front. We have got my son started on various sporting activities. He previously wasn't doing as much on that front. And as any parent will know, every single activity that you then sign your kid up to brings with it like a whole load of mental load and admin. So that's a pat on the back for us parents that we've managed to make that happen for him in areas that he really enjoys. So just taking the time to appreciate all of those areas of progress too on the parenting journey, that can be incredibly consuming, and it should be acknowledged and celebrated as well. So to wrap up, surrender was my word of the year. And I definitely feel like this year there was a lot more space for allowing myself to be supported by the universe, allowing things to just surface and following what came up. It's allowed me to appreciate the meaning of my work. And I think this is a bit of a shout out for those years where it's not as if there's some dramatic transformation. It's not like I've managed to achieve my pull up, for example, but it's all that quiet, regular input over time that builds. And this has been, for me, I think, one of those years. Having outlets as well, like dance and the garden, where it's not outcome focused, it's just for the love of it. We don't even know why we were doing the composting initially, me and my son. We just have these lovely days getting the compost all ready, and we'd say, like, we don't even know where we're going to put half this compost. And I think it's just the pointlessness of it, or the intrinsic joy that it gives without needing it to have a result, that is what is so wonderful about the surrender and things like the garden. I would almost go so far as to say it's in these kind of years that the real magic happens. So I hope this has given you some food for thought. I hope it might inspire you to take stock of areas where perhaps it doesn't feel like there's been massive transformations, but actually a lot of really good, solid work has happened. And most of all, I hope you enjoy your review process. It's one of the really rewarding parts of why we all even have goals and aspirations, taking that time to celebrate and take stock. So wishing you well with that. And I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.